Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you. Welcome out. Thank you for coming. It's such an early hour. I hope you all got some breakfast, got some, coffee. You're gonna need that. Okay, good. I'm Brett Tucker from Software Engineering Institute.
Randy Trezak, also Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute.
The Software Engineering Institute is a federally funded research and development center. It's funded by the U.S. government. We have a sponsor at the U.S. Air Force, and it is a research institution at Carnegie Mellon. So we're not a degree issuing institution. Rather, we conduct research in software engineering, cybersecurity, things like that to help advance both the public and private sector in cybersecurity. We're objective, unbiased advocates for better technology solutions and policy, which you're going to get a good bit of that here. So let me start with a story. Come on. You know what? Disregard. Going to go Amish on this one. Back in my Navy days, we had a funny expression for stories. I'll share it with you later if you care for it, because I'm not allowed to share it here. But imagine, if you will, stepping into my shoes, the fact that you've got that great job that you've always wanted, right? You've landed that chief information security officer role, that chief risk officer role, or heading up your own insider risk management program, whatever the case may be. The first thing you need to be thinking about is, well, how the heck am I going to deliver value with this program? And by the way, I want to insert intentionally that little piece of paranoia in your brain that should be incessant with how is it that I'm delivering that value back. Now, as I got into this role about 10 years ago, I was managing a risk program for a company that had about 15,000 people. I knew that I had to demonstrate value, and it was great because I had tons of people who would jump on me and say, hey, I know exactly what I want. Here's what I need you to report on. This is what's going to tell me that's going to make things better. But let's face it, I also had people who are lurkers. Like those, you see those people in the audience and they're like, oh, I know, I want your job. And to be honest with you, I am going to give you something that's totally going to torpedo your program. I know it, right? Then you have the others who are like, you know what? I don't even want to hear it. We're spending money on you. I don't even believe or trust you. And I don't even want to contribute to this. And then you have like that final player that's kind of like the, hey, I know I need help, but I really don't know what you're going to tell me what I need to do or what I need to have, right? So what we want to do is take you on this journey and give you some tools, some things to help you understand how better to set yourself up for establishing metrics in the program of your desire and design. And actually, that's where I'm going to bring in Randy, because he's going to speak to this idea of insider risk.
Okay, sounds good. Again, thank you very much. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Software Engineering Institute and the work we've done in insider threat, we've been fortunate to be doing insider threat research for about 20 years. As a federally funded research and development center, we've worked with a number of organizations to collect actual data, actual incidents where insiders have caused harm. And to date, we've analyzed about 4,000 incidents where insiders have caused harm to organizations. And if you haven't been to our website, we have over 120 reports that are available that you can read on the insider threat research we've done. And this presentation assumes that you are at least familiar what insider threat is, and certainly want to just very quickly set the foundation for insider threat program building. So with that being said, some of the recent incidents that we were fortunate to analyze, again, unfortunate for the organization because there was significant impact, would be incidents like a recently demoted software engineer stealing over $1 billion worth of technology and going to work for a foreign competitor. Pretty significant incident. That particular incident can be measured financially in terms of $1 billion worth of intellectual property. Another incident occurred when an identity theft ring here in the United States at a Department of Motor Vehicles, 7 employees sold over 200 fake identity documents and were financially compensated of value over $1 million. Pretty significant incident. The third one, a disgruntled contract employee at a wastewater tree plant was let go from that particular company. Prior to leaving, kept the hardware where he could then control the operational technology to discharge over 800,000 liters of raw sewage into local waterways. Pretty significant insider incident. And then finally, the last one in the bottom right, disgruntled former employee arrested and convicted for deploying malicious code to disrupt 911 emergency services. This particular individual worked for an IT and telecommunication company that provided that critical service for 911 emergency services. So with that as the backdrop of the insider incident and data, we certainly want to give you a very brief overview of insider threat, which is then going to set the context to be able to pull in some of the metrics that we can describe to you that might be ways by which you can measure the effectiveness of the insider risk program in your organization. So again, this is all available on our website. Again, we're just going to very quickly set the foundation. Then we'll get to the true heart of our presentation of defining and measuring the effectiveness of security programs, and specifically insider threat programs. So we tend to start on the left side of the chart here with what are the insiders, who are the insiders. Now, keeping in mind that we are all insiders to our organizations, what we want to try to avoid is the perception or the reality that we're profiling people in the organization when building an insider threat or insider risk program. So really starting on the left, who are the individuals that have authorized access is the starting point. Then we move to the next pillar, moving one to the right. What are the organization assets that you're trying to protect? Really, that's the foundation of cybersecurity. Prioritizing, collecting an asset inventory. We tend to describe the assets being the critical people in your organization, the facilities in which they work, the information and the technology. Now we can start narrowing down the individuals that have authorized access to the most critical assets as a way to narrow down that threat category of insider threats to organizations. Then over the years, we've done some foundational research describing the differences, but also similarities around insider incidents. We have patterns. Again, this is available on our website. What does insider fraud look like? What does insider theft of intellectual property look like? What does IT system sabotage look like? How do the events transpose over time? How do these events evolve over time? What are the risk indicators? So over the course of the years, we've been fortunate to have analyzed a lot of incidents. We've built the patterns around these different incident types. So really, when you're looking to build an effective insider risk program, we want to try to prevent harm, and then we can start working our way back to say what would then be compromised if an insider maliciously or unintentionally caused harm to the organization. So that's the foundation. Again, there's a lot more work on our website, but we did want to start that as the foundation as well. And really going to the axiom of cybersecurity, protecting confidentiality, availability, integrity. And again, without integrating this in your enterprise risk program, you're likely not going to identify all threats, including external, internal, malicious, non-malicious. And really, we've tried to do the foundational work around cyber incidents and physical incidents and the overlap between those as well. So again, very quickly, again, this assumes you have the knowledge of insider threat programs, but we certainly want to leave you with enough resources. If you haven't seen the publication, which is our Common Sense Guide to Mitigating Insider Threats, we've published 21 best practices to mitigate insider threats across government, the Department of Defense, industry, academia, law enforcement as well. And best practice number 2 is how to build an effective insider threat program. So again, this document is publicly available on our website. If you go to sei.cmu.edu or Software Engineering Institute, do a quick search for Common Sense Guide to Mitigating Insider Threats. It's probably not that short, that's not that, but again, it's a long title. But again, just do best practices, Carnegie Mellon University, Software Engineering Institute, or CERT, you'll find our best practice guide. And what we try to outline in terms of a program, again, this is where we start. Your program is in existence. We want to have a formalization of the program. We identify what we think are the 16 best practices for the instantiation of an insider threat program. Integrating with enterprise risk management. Looking specifically at our trusted external entities. So insiders typically are our traditional employees, but also think about the trusted business partners you work with as well. The folks that are the part-time, the temporary employees, the students, the interns, the trusted supply chain that you're working with as well. Anyone that has authorized access to your organization's critical assets is an insider and should be part of the insider threat program. And looking for ways by which you can formalize the entire program. This, again, is available on our website as well. And then finally, for those of you who are in the early stages of building an insider threat program, we want to refer you to this insider threat program roadmap. It walks you through the initiation of an insider threat program, the planning for the program. Then it goes through identifying stakeholders for the program. For those of you who may be in rows 1 or 2, you can maybe read some of the text up here. But really the key takeaway here is that the stakeholders are the information technologists in your organization, but it's much more than that. It's enterprise-wide. It's including human resources, physical security. Your general counsel will be part of that as well, your C-suite. So again, if you're looking for a roadmap, the first phase is initiating the program. Then you move into the blue column in the middle for planning for an insider threat program, achieving and sustaining the leadership support you'll need at the highest levels of the organization, integrating with enterprise risk management, doing detailed project planning, and then looking specifically at step number 5, developing a governance strategy over the program. Very, very important. Again, the perception or the reality of the program is, in some organizations, that you don't trust your employees, which is why you're building an insider threat program. And that should not be the focus of the program. We want to protect the organization from all threats, including insider threats. So it's very, very important to develop an appropriate governance structure for the insider threat program as well. And then as you move down through the planning stages here, when we develop the program, we want to communicate the existence of it. So we'll give you some advice and guidance on doing that. And then finally, on the very right side, the operation of the program. The goal here is to develop an insider threat program that can do anomaly detection. Since 2015, 2016, the federal government has had a mandate to build formal insider threat programs. They've developed minimum standards on what the program looks like. They have a requirement to build a data analytic hub, a centralized location for the data where you can identify insider threats. So we try to work with you and walk you through the process of collecting data, identifying data sources, integrating data together to where you can do anomaly detection, the prioritization of behaviorally based risk indicators and technically based risk indicators. Then finally, as you start detecting, when the alerts start being generated, how do we triage, how do we investigate, and how do we include external organizations if needed, such as law enforcement as well. And then finally, along the bottom is how do we then manage the effectiveness of the program, and this is where we're going to focus the remainder of our presentation today. So again, it's a great resource. This is available on our website, sei.cmu.edu, or this is actually published on the INSA, the Intelligence and National Security Alliance website, and it identifies the 13 steps that'll be part of an insider threat program roadmap. So thanks so much for your patience today with us going through that foundation, but it's very, very important if we're going to measure the effectiveness of the program to set this foundation. So I'll turn it over to Brett to kind of walk us through, and then we'll pull this back in the next couple minutes to insider threat program measurement as well.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. So let's talk about the tool aspect of this, because to be honest with you, a good takeaway from this whole discussion is more than just metric development for an insiders program. It could be for just about any program. Now, it's great that we're going to provide you a case study, and Randy's here as an expert for that insider use case. But I want to talk about the tools and themes that are going to be very important to you as you move through this. So to start with, there are a lot of things that Randy said that I want to point out right away that really will sink into these questions as you're going through this in your mind, like establishing like a mental map for how you go about this. One is, I hope you picked up from what he said, is this is not an individual sport. This is a team sport. So when you go about thinking about what are you measuring, you're going to have customers, obviously, that need to ingest the information, decision makers, and they're truly making risk-based decisions. But you also want to get help, like if it's general counsel you're speaking to, if it's HR, especially in regards to the insider risk program, you're going to want to think about who is it that I need to tap? Who's going to help me do this? Now, there's other thoughts too, and I always say this to my grad students and customers alike. It's really important to understand that you're delivering information more than data. As a matter of fact, that's so important. Let me say that one more time. Deliver information more than data. Now, I get it. You're going to have customers out there who are like, show me the numbers, show me the reason, show me how. But I will say that that's somewhat rare, especially when you get to the executive levels, and they just almost want like an elevator graphic, is something that they can pick up off the floor, totally understand what's going on, and make the decision that they need to make. Time is money, right? So as you're assessing the context of the discussion that you're getting into in developing these metrics, always think about the information first, and then it may help once you have that information that you're looking for to go dig for the data, right? I guess there could be a bottom up where, hey, I have this bucket of data and I'm going to figure out what information I can glean from it, fine. But that's going to turn into like a quick story of looking for that needle in a haystack kind of a thing, right? How do you know what to clean, what to focus on? So think about context. Another thing too, this can get pricey. Be careful, right? If you're going to have somebody on your team who's collecting, aggregating, cleaning this data, trying to understand what kind of information they're getting out of it, that analysis takes time. It takes money. Somebody's going to be doing it. Is it yourself, or is it somebody who's on your team think about those factors as well. You know, is there a way to automate? Is there a way to think about how to get more simpler metrics or information out of it? Is there ways that I can collect the data in a way that it parses it properly as I'm bringing it in? Okay, so at the end of the day, remember, you're collecting this data, getting information, and you're doing it so that people can make decisions with it. Very important. It always helps to tie your metrics back to the strategy of the organization. Think about what value your program is supposed to deliver. Think about the strategic objectives of the organization overall, and try to leverage those metrics so that they tell that story, right? You want to knit together how this security program is actually delivering value for the organization. If it's not doing that, it's not going to serve you very well, right? It's almost going to be just like information that's not going to be very beneficial for you as much as your customers that you're providing it to. You may take another look at this and think about, well, what kind of controls have we put in place? Can we demonstrate that the controls that we have in place are delivering that value to the organization, that they're achieving the organizational objectives that we have related to our program? Furthermore, you may want to be a little more forward-leaning in your program and think about, okay, so if I start reporting on certain aspects of my program, am I going to provide indication that I have greater need in the future? For example, maybe a part of your program is only looking at a small fraction of the workforce, but maybe you want to grow that to your entire workforce. Clearly that sounds like a good idea, but did you think even further? Maybe you want to start thinking about your supply chain, services, and people who are bringing things to your organization that you have provided some level and degree of access. You may want to extend beyond that. You're going to take more money, time, resources. How do your metrics help? How can you pivot those metrics to help you tell that story? It's very important. Now, for those of you who are taking pictures of slides, I welcome you to do so, but be cautious with this particular slide because I actually have some barbed metrics in here that are not necessarily ideal, and I'm going to point them out to you here in a second. One is, though, the word that should jump off the slide to you is strategy. We already talked about that idea, right? But a lot of these metrics, in some cases, are not as helpful as written as you might think them. I'll draw your attention actually to, let's just say, and I'll pick another random one, number of exercises completed. Well, if I complete one exercise, I don't know, I think I'm doing pretty good. But if the metric is built out so it's written of, hey, I completed 1 of 12 exercises necessary in a year, holy cow, that delivers me so much more information than I can think about, right? You know where you're at that point in the year. Do you have enough time to deliver 11 more exercises? So when you think about structuring and writing and building out these metrics, think about the context that you're delivering it, and think about the information that you're giving to people as well. Another good one is development of COOP plans, right? If I need a continuity of operations plan, simple example, right? Well, hey, you could have a plan, but how well is it implemented? Are the teams educated? So you might want to think about, in terms of development of COOP plans, maybe something more along the lines of maybe some project management related metrics. Maybe it's cost performance index or schedule variance or budget variance. And that's just to get it developed. Then you want to think about, well, how well is it implemented? And you want to build that out. So when you read these metrics at the face of it, or if you just start brainstorming, you want to honestly think about, like, what is the customer hearing? What are they going to take away? And what are they going to do with that information? So what I want to do, and actually I'll skip ahead here just to bring it all out on the slide for those taking pictures. I want to give you a process called GQIM. Anybody familiar? Maybe anyone heard? No? All right, good. So walk away with another great tool for the day. GQIM stands for Goal, Question, Indicator, Metric. And what we're doing through this process is we're really trying to link back the metrics to the strategic objectives we're trying to accomplish. You can step through this by establishing what the objectives are for your organization, but thinking more deeply about the goals tied to it, and then asking questions related to, well, how is it that we go about accomplishing those goals? And then further to that, how do we know? What are the indicators? What are the things that we see that we want to actually report on? And establish bounds and tolerances of appreciation for what we are trying to accomplish. So we know if we're going over the hill and not doing so well, or maybe things are going really well. That builds out the metric idea. So over the next few slides, let's kind of walk this down a little bit. Imagine I'm in an organization. I'm in that new job again that we started off the whole presentation with. And I know that I need to have better responsiveness in my organization. I need to know that I am recovering from incidents a lot more effectively. I want to be overall resilient in my organization. So these are two great ideas, right? As a matter of fact, maybe I'm following NIST CSF or something to that effect. Makes sense. Now notice to the right how I'm decomposing each of these into specific goals. Improve the process for detection of events. Well, how does that work? Let's actually just pick that one and just kind of blow that out. As a matter of fact, what you're going to see here on the next slide, you're going to pick detection specifically, and I'm going to decompose that into different questions I need to ask about detecting an insider risk event. Okay? As the questions come out, you're going to start answering each of these to establish how you know, the indicators. Okay? I also want to note, as you're doing this, this process is very iterative. I did not develop these sets of questions here just at one sitting, right? This may take time, and this is where you, as a professional, need to pick up on the facilitation game. Who is it you're going to go talk to? Can you explain clearly what the process is that you're delivering? And as you're going and walking through that process, familiarizing the person that you're interviewing what has been said and done and what new could be added to the pile. By the way, when you're going through this process, there's really no wrong question here. So there's no need to be critical. There's no need to, chide the person for any ideas that they throw at you. To be honest with you, be upfront with it and say, hey, this is an ongoing process. We're trying to figure out what we need. I just want to hear your thoughts, your words. I want to have your purchase or your participation in this program, and here's how we're going to deliver. So as you're going down, this question step's really important where you're going to start facilitating what people really want out of this measure. And then finally, you can start building upon the questions to understand, well, what specifically do I need from each of them? What are the indicators, or how do I know? So as you read through the how do I knows, for example, do we have tools for the event? Well, sure. I can do an inventory of assets that I have in place or tools that I have. I can think about what I'm trying to detect. I can think about the things that I haven't detected yet. And those indicators are important to a point. Notice how there are really no bounds of expectation, though, with the indicators yet. That's going to be on the next slide. So in other words, tools inventory. Well, do I have one tool? Do I have two? What's the expectation? Yet another thing that you need to facilitate as you're walking this path, right? You build out the questions, you think about the indicators, ask the person, ask those that are in your customer set, ask experts, hey, what is it that's the baseline or the benchmark for the organization? I just hit on another big word here. Start thinking about benchmarking across other organizations, whether they're in your sector or whether they are in your industry. Maybe it's a competitor, maybe it's consulting that you look for, to start trying to understand, well, what specifically are the measures that are acceptable based upon, another one, regulatory, maybe they have expectations set upon you. So that will help you actually build out the metrics and the numbers that you're thinking you're gonna get. Oh man, you know what, I just said the wrong word too. I just said numbers. Sure, it comes down to quantification in most cases, and by the way, I'm not opposed. I think quantification is great, but remember, at the end of the day, you're trying to deliver information. You're trying to get it to the customer so that they understand what decision needs to be made. Do I need to buy a new control? Do I need to buy a new tool? Do I need to hire more people? If so, how do I know, and what value am I going to get back based upon that metric? The great thing here, this is like the butterfly effect, the butterfly that flaps its wings on the east coast of Africa and turns into a hurricane by the time it hits the east coast. You can build this out and it actually blow up on you quite quickly. So with this slide, what I need you to recognize is prioritization and importance. Start thinking about the value of the metrics that you've built out. Which ones are most important to report? Some clearly are going to be back office metrics. Some are going to be that you report regularly at executive board meetings. So you have to start thinking about that as well. And I'm sure as you think about that, the back office metrics can be a little bit more quantitative, maybe less information side because, let's face it, you're experts sitting in the seat. You're going to know what you're looking for. But executive teams, they may not necessarily know that. So you may have to continually remind them of the bounds of tolerance that they're willing to accept with these metrics. So let me just leave you with this slide before I turn over to Randy here. The top things that have really helped us as we've helped customers and partners build out these metrics, right? First of all, the goal, question, indicator, metric process. If you need, we can leave that slide behind so you can take a picture of it. Make sure you know those steps and walk them down well. Be good facilitators, okay? Always link back to the objectives of your organization, specifically the strategic ones of your organization as well, okay? It helps at times when you can get like a quick and easy metric to just kind of get it out and share with people that they can easily understand and accept and can pivot on your program and understand quickly. But as time goes on and the organization matures, you're going to want to build those out a little bit better. Continually represent and provide business leaders with the right words to relate what value your organization or your program, what your program's delivering for the organization, and make sure that your metrics are current and they stay relevant for what you're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'm going to turn back over to Randy, and he's going to give you a glimpse as to what that looks like in insider risk space.
Okay, thanks again, Brett. So let's tie this back to insider threat program development. How do we measure the effectiveness of a program? We certainly want to leave with enough resources. And we'll leave some time at the end of our session for questions. And if you do have questions after the session today, we do have a booth on the exhibitor floor. Feel free to stop by. I'd love to talk to you more about it. So pulling this back into the insider risk or insider threat context, specifically knowing where you're starting from is the most important part of measuring the effectiveness of the program. So for example, in the context of insider threat program building, we'll use the categories of do we have something implemented, fully implemented, partially implemented, and not implemented at all, or not applicable, and we go down through a couple of categories. So for example, is there awareness in your organization of insider threat as a challenge or a problem? We just picked randomly that this is partially implemented in an organization. Then we go down to the next criteria, receiving and getting executive management support. Again, this in this organization, fictitious organization, fully implemented. Is there organization-wide participation? Not implemented. Again, as we said, going back to those critical components of a program based upon about 20 years of research, we think these are the starting points for insider threat programs. Do you have policies and procedures in place? Not implemented, partially, fully implemented. One of the things that we found as a challenge to many organizations is they either had a policy or didn't. That's a yes or no question. But some organizations have a policy, but it's not implemented. It's not institutionalized in the organization. So as Brett was mentioning before, specifically saying that if it's partially implemented or fully implemented, you want to have ways by which you can measure the effectiveness of the policies. So again, as we look to say, does a policy exist? Is it clearly communicated? Is it consistently enforced? Those are the criteria by which you can start measuring specifically the policy portion of your insider threat program. Do you have insider threat controls and defenses in place? Not implemented, partially, fully implemented, not applicable. Do you have technical data sources being collected? This gets to the automation phase. In this fictitious organization, fully implemented. And finally, behavioral data sources being collected. One of the things we found very early on in insider threat program building is that if you're looking at the technical indicators alone, you're likely only detecting that an insider incident occurs, finding out ways by which you can integrate the human resources, the behavioral data, the risk indicators that are based upon the human. You may have a way by which you can likely prevent or divert someone off that critical pathway that's moving down to harm the organization. So again, this is a starting point for most organizations' programs, looking at what you currently have in place today. So now let's get into the return on investments. Some of the challenges you'll find as you're building a program, early stages, before the program is built, some of the organizations want an ROI estimate before the program starts. So think about that. Before we even have a program, they want that return on investment calculated. Certainly the challenge is that maybe I have some information, as Brett said, where I can make some conjecture about what that's going to be, but it's going to be very hard at the beginning of the program to calculate that return on investment. At the start of the program, again, the upfront costs for many programs are pretty significant when you're investing in the tools or the technology. So really certainly calculating the ROI at the beginning of the program gets unwieldy at the beginning as we're looking to estimate some of those costs. One of the things that we found successful organizations start with is, what do we have in place today, that previous slide? What tools do we have in place that we may not call insider threat controls or detection mechanisms do we have in place? Or could we take an existing tool and configure it slightly different to detect insider threats as well? So starting small, and specifically starting with specific categories of threats. Over the years, we've worked with a number of organizations, including a large manufacturing organization, who said to us when they've implemented the program, their entire threat category for insider threats was departing employees. People on the way out the door taking their key intellectual property. So their entire insider threat program for the first 12 to 18 months was one category of threat very specifically, and now we don't have to make that large investment in all of the insider threat tools. They started very small with existing capabilities and supplemented those with a smaller set of an optimal insider threat program. And then finally, as we're going on with the program, as we move from a nascent capability to the initial operating capacity to full operating capacity, you want to make sure that it's ongoing in terms of calculating the return on investment. So again, as you're well aware, security in itself is not a revenue generating function. The most security operations don't generate revenue, they consume the revenue from the organization. So how do we demonstrate that in the form of insider threat, but also security programs as well? So let's start with a couple of resources you might want to start with. INSA, the Intelligence and National Security Alliance, had a report measuring the effectiveness of insider threat programs. We were very fortunate as part of this CERT division of the Software Engineering Institute to be part of this study. And basically defining and developing these ROI and measures of effectiveness will help you to justify the need for budget and personnel. An unfunded mandate in an organization to build an insider threat program is likely not going to be successful. So how do we have the ability to justify the investment in security without being able to calculate that the return on investment? So we're going to start there in terms of the measures of the effectiveness. But also, it allows you to gain the support of senior executives and leaders and to remain as a champion of the program as well. One of the outcomes from this particular study, only 32% of the practitioners said they could determine the program effectiveness, so pretty small in terms of the organization's programs. So let's walk through that. So how can we do this? So typically you would see an ROI being profit divided by cost as the two primary inputs. So but then the standpoint of what we just said is that the security investments don't generate revenue. So how then can we develop some of these metrics? Looking at ways by which we can avoid the cost of an incident would be one of the starting points. So again, in that one example we said before, a manufacturing organization values their intellectual property at $1 million. So again, the avoidance of that. As they were detecting people leaving and they were trying to detect people taking that IP, they were trying to say that we demonstrate the value of we saved or we prevented harm being valued at the number of incidents that we stopped by the value of the asset that we're trying to protect as one of the inputs into this calculation. So again, we're not generating revenue, but we're avoiding it could be part of that calculation. And looking specifically at the cost portion of that formula, again, how much does it cost from an employee standpoint, the wages, the salaries, what tools do we invest in? Are we hiring people outside in terms of consultants, investigators? Again, that should be part of the inputs into the ROI calculations. So how do we measure? Well, we can certainly do assessments. There's a lot of work that's being done on assessments. You know, assessments could include self-assessments. We mentioned the federal government for about 10 years has had a requirement to build formal insider threat programs. They have a mandate to do external third-party assessments of the program, but also internal self-assessments as well. So you can start with self-assessments, identifying what we currently have in place today as a gap assessment, what we don't have in place, and develop that roadmap as well. Risk assessments could be helpful as well, vulnerability assessments, looking at ways by which we can test our procedures, our workflows and skill sets, tabletop exercises, etc. Very, very effective ways to get some of that data that can support the information that Brett talked about as well. Recognizing that your senior leader of your program, your insider threat program manager, will need to work with senior managers. We want to build this and tie this to the strategy discussion that Brett talked about as well. And going through that GQIM process, very, very valuable, tying it to the mission of the organization. So as you look to measure your program against the external organizations, the National Insider Threat Task Force has been in existence for 10 plus years. They have standards for insider threat programs. So try to measure yourself against other organizations. We at Carnegie Mellon manage a community of interest, which is called the Insider Threat Open Source Information Sharing Group, specifically on insider threat. We'd love to invite you to be part of that community. No cost to join. So again, you can talk to other organizations that are building insider threat programs as well. You can be measured against third-party criteria, doing scorecarding or benchmarking, as we mentioned before, and really looking by ways by which you can see where you are in relation to your insider threat program. Specifically as we look at the components, we want to measure specific components. In the essence of time, we can't go into details of all of those 16 areas, but what we want to be able to do is to use third-party assessments. If you are interested, DHS, CISA, has an insider threat self-assessment tool that you can download, a great resource as well. On our website, the CERT website of Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute, we have an insider threat program evaluation framework. You can download and use it as well. So as we mentioned at the very beginning, we're a federally funded research and development center. Our work is publicly available, and certainly go to our website to download that as well. And as we wrap up our session, as we get close to the end of time, we want to kind of put this into more specific criteria. Again, we don't have the time to do this for all of the areas, of 16 areas, so we just picked one. So how would you evaluate, for example, the training and awareness component of an insider threat program? Well, you can use across the top the post-test scores. Again, training and awareness. What's the average score of people taking the exams? What's the number of employees with passing scores? What's the number of employees with passing scores on the first attempt? So again, as Brett described, you can lay this out very specifically. Not just saying how many tests have occurred, make it more specific to where you can measure the effectiveness. Because again, if you have specific criteria, you can see that high rates of passing on the first attempt may indicate your test is too easy. So again, don't stop short. Get to specifics as you get to build these metrics as well. How about pre and post test scores? What's the change in employee from pre to post as a way to measure the effectiveness? The pre scores and the test out, how many people have tested out? So again, this is just one example by which you could be very specific to one of the components of your insider threat program. And as we look specifically at what are the right metrics, so we described that what are the right metrics based upon who are the team members that are part of your insider threat program. What are reporting? Who's reporting the metrics specifically? What knowledge do they have? So as you're building the metrics, take into account the team members that are part of your metrics development process, but also looking at the audience in the top right. Who will then be the ones receiving these metrics? Very, very important. We want to give the information to the decision makers in the organization, so the audience need to be part of the metrics development process. The bottom left component, what is the organization context? Specifically looking at what are the number of metrics being reported, what is the opportunity to explain the metric. So again, the organization context is very, very important. And then finally, the bottom right, looking at the age or the maturity of your program, very, very important. So again, as we look at this, we'll go into just one more slide with a bit more detail. So the nascent programs, as you're just considering building a program, you're likely going to have high detection rates. We found over the years that organizations that develop tools and implement tools, when you develop the tools, everything's an anomaly or nothing's an anomaly at the very beginning. Not very, very helpful. So think about the context of at the very beginning of your process, the nascent programs, we want to continue to evolve when we get into the initial operating capacity. Specifically as we are able to configure the tools, our tools might be a little better to detect the certain risk indicators. And then as we move into the mature operating of our program, you'll see that you might be doing better at the prevention of insider incidents, which you're detecting less. Doesn't mean your program isn't effective, but we're doing better preventative, and we're seeing less from a detection standpoint. So think about the context of the metrics in the life cycle of the insider threat program. So again, thank you so much. We're not done yet. We're going to wrap this up and we'll leave some time for questions, but I do encourage you to come to our booth, the Software Engineering Institute on the exhibitor floor, and I'll turn it over to Brett to wrap up our presentation.
Sure, thanks, Randy. And just to give you that quick walkaway, where have we been and where have we gone? Holy cow, we've been down such a long path here. And to be honest with you, remember, this whole process we've shown you is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't expect to be successful on the first day. And to be honest with you, don't expect to be so successful at the 26th mile. This is a learning process. Like I said, it's very iterative. So within the next few weeks, maybe you establish the objectives that you need for your program, your organization. And then within the first 3 months, hopefully you're having those facilitated meetings with stakeholders to understand what their concerns are, where they may be. You may have a couple pop-up metrics right away that you're able to share with your organization, but be sure to hedge. Hey, this is not going to be the end of our story. Maybe these are the first few metrics we plan to report on, but as we evolve, as we gain more maturity, say in the next 6 months or so, we should be able to utilize some of these metrics to give you the information you need to make those risk-based decisions. So thank you so much for your time. We're happy to take questions now, and as we walk out, We'll be outside to help out. We wanted to leave this one last slide with you. Thanks for bringing that up. If anyone wants to take a picture, there's lots of resources. Randy mentioned our CERT website has tons of things related to insider risk programs, metrics development, all that stuff. Honestly, you'd be cheating yourselves for not taking advantage of those free resources. So please reach out. Let us know if you have questions. Okay?
Thanks. Questions?
IT people accidentally misconfigure cloud stuff all the time. Do you consider something like that an insider threat? And so your list of insider threats kind of left out that sort of a piece, but wouldn't that be helpful in justifying your insider threat program?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question and great comment. Yes, absolutely. Insider threats are any individual that has authorized access when they have malicious intent, but also when they accidentally or non-maliciously cause harm to organizations as well. We do consider that an insider incident that needs to be part of the security program to try to prevent and detect and recover from those non-malicious insider incidents as well. So on our website, we have reports on malicious insider incidents and the accidental incidents or the non-malicious incidents as well. And most security programs should address the malicious and non-malicious equally. Thank you. Great point.
Most of the time we expect these people, DevOps and various folks, right? They're trusted people. So if you start to put them in an untrusted category, life is get very complicated because they do have various things they can do. So if you start to put them in, I do not know how this will help. If you start to put them in a DevOps and untrusted category, how are you going to control them? That's basically the question.
Yeah, certainly from the insider perspective, we do need to trust our employees. Trust but verify the opportunities. What we found over the course of years is that organizations allowed, for example, privileges to accumulate over time. A person's in one job today, they go to another job tomorrow, and they go to another job in a month. They tend to accumulate privileges, which allows an insider to violate or to exploit some of the separation of duties that are put in place. So absolutely right. Insiders do need to be trusted with the appropriate roles, responsibilities, and privileges commensurate to the job opportunity, and verification is important as well. Most organizations will never go through a malicious insider incident, but when it does, it's pretty significant. So having security controls in place that can prevent, detect, and respond, but realizing employees need to be trusted, that will be the foundation of your insider risk or insider threat program.
One of the things I wanted to just share and comment on, I've built insider threat programs at several big places. People shouldn't underestimate the amount of time it takes to get the data together. So at the beginning of your program, it's very important to build relationships with technology and the larger cyber enterprise, because you're going to get most of your data from that. And then the other sort of difficulty I've always encountered is a lot of the data you're interested in is existing in the business in Excel files, and pulling those and integrating all that. So make sure you have good data engineers, good data wranglers that can take advantage of the data in the enterprise already.
Yeah, 100% agree. Great comments, and 100% support your position as well. But also having senior leadership support to get the approval to get the data into this data analytic hub is critical as well. So absolutely agree, 100%. Don't minimize that as the effort, but also don't minimize the authority that's needed to convince human resources or physical security or the line of business to integrate some portion of that data into your insider risk program. 100%. Thank you. Great comment.
Do you also look at the non-IT aspects of things? You have a disgruntled employee who may, workplace violence, those type of things. Does that factor into the model as well?
It does, again, but that's really the scope of your insider threat program in your organization. Some organizations have a separate physical security component and a cyber component that's separated. Some organizations integrate those together. So really what the scope of your program is it intended to protect the people and the IT or the cyber assets as the scope of the program? Then absolutely yes, you would need to integrate physical security, personnel security into your insider risk or insider threat program as well. So it would depend upon the scope of the organization, which is, again, knowing where you're starting from is the critical component. But yeah, great point.
First of all, Brett and Randy, huge fan of your work in the insider threat space.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, if you've not taken the certification for Insider Threat Program, SEI, it's a really good
Thank
one.
you.
My
Appreciate
question
that.
to you is, how do you deal with challenges with European Work Council just in referring to Insider Threat Program? That's often I get a lot of pushback from the work councils. Any feedback or pointers there?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge. I wish we had the silver bullet answer to that, but really working here in the United States would have a different context of working with a European Works Council or some other non-US based work council, but really making that part of the strategy is the critical component. Having senior leadership support at the highest level of the organization to require them to have a seat at the table, to have them participate in the scoping of the program, the approval of policies that will be implemented that is ensuring the protection of things like privacy and civil liberties. Very, very important as well. So when we say that the table is pretty long when it comes to insider threat program building, that's intentional. We do want to have the works councils be part of the scoping of the program and also part of the governance of the program as well to make sure it's staying within scope, the data we're collecting is being used appropriately, it's being protected appropriately, and it's being disposed of appropriately as well. That governance is very, very important to make sure you have an oversight of watching the watchers when it comes to insider threat programs. So I wish I had a better answer other than they need to be involved at the very beginning, the middle, and continuously to make sure they're providing input into the program, and whatever requirements they're providing that's approved by the organization, we're making sure that we're following whatever their requirements are to ensure things like privacy and civil liberties are protected. But great question and good comment. So I do believe that we're out of time. Again, so if you're interested, we do have a booth on the exhibitor floor, 1735, the Software Engineering Institute. Please go to our website, sei.cmu.edu, or do a quick search for CERT. The CERT is part of the Software Engineering Institute. As I mentioned, we have over 125 reports available on insider threat, including a lot of resources that you can actually download for free, the best practice guide and the assessment methodologies as you're looking to build an insider threat program. So thank you very much for your participation today, and look forward to talking to you through the rest of the conference.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you.